So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another patch preview sort of pair of battles I think I'll do, because obviously this one is quite short at 6,000 frames. Most 1v1s tend to be pretty quick with a few exceptions, and we're on a very misty grassy plain, and I'm in this one once again, and you can see that I'm playing as IMLADRIS, so I will go through the army compositions fairly quickly, noting on a few of the name changes and style changes. So I've got some Elder Quinga here at the front, who are of course the sort of renamed version of the Bow Quindy. They've been given a bit of a unit model upgrade as well with the cloaks. Obviously as Elven archers will be still very good, but they won't be like able to just completely machine gun down enemy lines anymore. IMLADRIS in particular I think are not the most archer focused of the Elven factions. I think, you know, what really sells them is their infantry and their cavalry. Obviously their archers are still going to be very good, but you do need to be careful obviously that you don't get overrun. And yeah, so I've got my Elder Quinga at the front, these sort of the lower tier Elven archers, but obviously that's still going to be significantly better than lower tiers from other factions. I've got a couple of Norröna warriors out here on the flanks as well, slightly better than the Elder Quinga, both at range and in melee. Obviously their unit models have stayed the same, but then they look pretty cool anyway. And if we look over here, you can see I've also got some Norröna cavalry. So once again, this is going to be a slightly lower tier. High Elven cavalry, they are quite fragile to both ranged fire, and if you leave them in sustained melee as lancers, they will start to fall away. Obviously the lack of shields is not going to help them against ranged threats, but they are also the closest thing the High Elves have to a budget cavalry option. Most of their other cavalry units, I think all of their other cavalry units actually are 1,000 florins and upwards, so you know, for the 750 you get the Norröna cavalry for, that's a pretty good deal, and they are still very capable. Against equivalent units they will probably last longer, but you know, you do have to be careful against that ranged fire and against getting them trapped in melee for too long. Got some IMLADRIS Blade Masters as well. Shock units, I think they are cheaper than the Elder Swordsmen now, so there is a reason to pick them. They don't have multiple HP however, and also they, I think something unique about them is they do extra damage against cavalry in sustained melee, so that's one reason why I decided to put them with the Norröna warriors in case my opponent was very aggressive coming forwards. And then obviously I've got some Eldar Makar over here, so this is the replacement, well, I say replacement, it is the Sword Quindy. They've just been given a makeover and a new name, so obviously they've got the cloaks that the upgraded Bow Quindy unit model now has, and they've also been given slightly more detailed shields. They look pretty cool. Obviously they are going to be the unit which you're probably going to be relying on most of all to sort of be your front lines, because they are really the only unit you can afford to bring en masse. And then back here I've got the higher tier sword and shield unit of IMLADRIS, the IMLADRIS Guardians, of course, the renamed Mythalon Nobles. I did want to upgrade the unit model for these guys because obviously they look like the IMLADRIS Storm Guard, which are a very cool unit when you upgrade their armour, but I ran out of money, so unfortunately we just got the regular variant. They still look pretty cool in their own way. And then if we look over here, we can see that I've got my favourite unit in the world, the Elder Archers, but fortunately they are not AP anymore, so they won't just be able to gun everyone down as they approach, I don't think. And also you can only have one before the cost increases, so it's going to be basically the cheaper variant of the Noldor Elder Nobles now, so it's going to be interesting to see how they perform in this fight. And of course I've got their stakes pointing backwards to try and prevent any hammer and anvils. And then I'm sure, as you noticed on the way past, I've also got this as my General's Bodyguard, the Eregian Heavy Cavalry. Again, this is another unit model that's been given a makeover. You can see that they've got new helms, and they've got the shields that the Eregian foot units have, and obviously this was previously the Elder Nobles. So it's an interesting, I've tried to go for a sort of more balanced composition to see how IMLADRIS do, and of course I haven't played as the Elves yet, so it'll be interesting to see how this army performs. You can see that I've tried to go wider, because I do know, based on how I've played as the Elves before, their biggest problem is getting surrounded, so I was going to try and make that as difficult as possible for my opponent, and my opponent is Creed, who is playing as Rune. So once again I find myself facing down the Golden Horde, and he has brought some Loke in his room, of course Creed being the Discord champion. We have this sort of heavy cataphract style cavalry, the Loke in his room. They're likely not going to be able to catch up to my cavalry, but if they do get a charge onto my lighter infantry, they are going to wreak some havoc. He's also got some horse archers, which again might be a bit of a problem for me, but if they stray too close to my archers, they will get mown down. And then as we go into his infantry line, and it'll quickly become apparent that he's gone for a rush style army, which shouldn't be surprising considering how short the battle is. The Istron Clansmen, obviously the Clansmen with their upgraded armour look like the Swiftblade, so it just goes to show this is a visual metaphor, I think, for how upgrading the armour will now genuinely make your units considerably tougher. because obviously the clansmen are the lowest tier of runic infantry, and if you upgrade them they look like this, which looks like solid mid-tier. They still will lose pretty handily in sustained melee to all of my infantry though, but that will make them tougher for my archers to deal with. Considering I've got 5 units of archers, it should be interesting to see how they perform. He's also got some heavier flag rim back here, who are of course tougher in every way. And as we move in here, we've got the unupgraded clansman, once again being backed up by some flag rim. And if we look back here, he's also got his archers, so he's gone for some Eastron clan hunters, so he's gone for lower tier archers. Just having some sort of archer presence on the field is worth it. And some of IMLADRIS' units, while the higher tiers are pretty well armoured, some of the sort of lower tier units will be quite susceptible to that, in particular stuff like my Noritano cavalry. And as we move in here, we've got some more Eastron clansmen. We can see he's also got the Carmel's Dragon Knights, so this is going to be pretty much a direct answer to my Eregian heavy cavalry, although my cavalry is faster than his sort of heavier cataphracts. But I'm not going to be able to deal with the Dragon Knights at range, so I'm going to have to try and engage them in melee and see how it goes. We also have the Carmel's Chosen over here. Once again, a very tough, solid, sort of heavy infantry unit in melee. It's going to be interesting to see once again how the elves deal with this sort of elite human infantry. The Carmel's Chosen, of course. You know, for Rune, they are pretty much the closest equivalent to the good human factions. And then we look over here, it's a similar story on this side, some clansmen and some flag rim, and then he's got some more cavalry on this side, so once again he's got some very ag mercenary riders. And I think over here, indeed, he's got the Dragon's Wrath Warlords, so this of course is it's just the new name for the runic bodyguard unit, because bodyguard is a boring name of course, and they've been given a nice new unit model upgrade as well, which I believe I showed before. But of course they are, you know, they look very cool now, so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. So, without further ado, let us begin the first of the 2 battles I'm going to show. And of course, it should be no surprise here that Creed is going to immediately rush forward and try and overwhelm. This is going to be a tactic I think we're going to see against the elves quite a lot, simply because they are quite susceptible to being surrounded. Having said that, you know, a lot of these units are lower tier, so when they do get into melee with my infantry, which you can see I'm immediately pushing forward, because I didn't actually think he would be this aggressive, so I'm immediately just sort of trying to get my Quendi units and my sort of heavier infantry, my IMLADRIS Blade Masters, into melee. And you can see immediately that these Dragon Knights are taking a lot of archer fire, but ultimately only one of them fell to a withering arrow storm. They're going to be able to charge into those Eldar Makar and rip through them nearly. But you can see that with my IMLADRIS Guardians and my Blade Masters on hand, the Dragon Knights will need to retreat. And you can see over here that the Dragon's Wrath Warlords are going to be sort of engaged by my Noritano cavalry. I don't want them to get round the back of me quite yet, so I know they're going to lose, but I'm going to try and stall them. You can see though that the infantry engagement has gotten underway, and my infantry is going to be considerably better than all of Rune's over here. So you can see that the Carmel's Chosen are coming in. This is probably the one part of the runic line which is going to do quite well against my Eldar Makar. But you can see all along the line over here, you can see the clansmen are not going to do quite so well. But you can see that over here I have managed to get my cavalry in behind the lines as well. So this Eregian heavy cavalry is going to charge into the backs of this flag rim and these clansmen. So over here things are going quite well for me already. You can see that that cavalry charge is pretty lethal. That Noritano cavalry is going to go and hunt down what's left of those mercenary riders who have already taken a heavy beating from my archers. The archers still firing away, of course, and my Eldaran way over there as well. You can see that over here though, Rune are faring much better. So we're basically winning on one flank each. You can see that these Noritano warriors are firing. I'm going to try and get into those Eastron clansmen, the Noritano cavalry. I'm going to get a nice charge onto the clansmen to try and kill a few of them. Obviously most of Rune's heavy infantry is going to be, well, most of Rune's infantry here is of the lower tier, so I'm just going to turn it down a little bit because it is a bit fast and furious. You can see that the IMLADRIS Blade Masters are doing a very, very good job. They're carving through the clansmen. The flag rim will take a little bit more work, but they're still doing very well here. You can also see that this is that the Dragon's Wrath Warlords are getting a charge on my IMLADRIS Guardians. Unfortunately, that's going to mean they're probably going to lose to this flag rim as a result of the cavalry pressure. I've also got these Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen coming around the flanks, and as soon as they start throwing their knives, things are going to get very nasty for me pretty quickly. But you can see that here in the middle, the clansmen have completely buckled in the face of my Quendi, and that's not too surprising, to be fair. The clansmen were never going to do too much, so in the centre I've won pretty handily. You can see that out over here, the Inas Rim have managed to charge into my Noritano warriors. I have managed to sort of surround over here though, the Eldar Makar. I think I've got some IMLADRIS Guardians over here as well. I have, and the Blade Masters are around here, so the flag rim over here are getting slowly cut down. Back over here you can see that there is actually a pretty lethal cav engagement going on between the two elites, the Dragon Knights and the Eregian Heavy Cavalry, but I think as a result of a bit of my archer support, my Eregian heavy cavalry is going to pull this fight out, and I'm going to be able to defeat his most elite cavalry unit on the field. As we sort of move backwards, we can see the Eldar Makara here. Meanwhile, something else which is a bit of a concern for me, I've got my Elder Enway Archers over here, my elite archer unit. The Dragon's Wrath Warlords are coming in, however, they are charging forth. And the Elder Enway Archers are going to take a lethal charge from one of the heaviest cavalry units that is available to Rune. I'm trying to sort of trap them in with my Noritano cavalry, because if I can shut down Rune's cavalry, I think that I'm in a pretty good place, because my infantry is really very elite. And you can actually see over here that the Carmel's Chosen, alone they would obviously beat a unit of Gwendi, but their clansman support was completely destroyed, and I'm now able to get a surround up on them. They're still going to win here, it looks like, but the Carmel's Chosen are not able to punch through the centre of my line. The Clan Hunters have been firing all this time. You can see actually that the Dragon's Wrath Warlords managing to escape that situation as well. I'm trying to fire into their backs though, trying to negate some of that shield value. You can see if we have a look at the percentages of kills, I'm actually pulling quite far ahead in terms of the percentage of kills. As we can see, we've also got these IMLADRIS Blade Masters still fighting against these Eastron clansmen with the upgraded armour. And obviously the Blade Masters are going to tear their way through a unit like Clansmen. Let's go and have a look over. Oh, hello. The Dragon's Wrath Warlords charging in once again, getting another nice charge. So this Runic Heavy Cavalry is really proving to be a thorn in my side. You can see this Noritano Cavalry is going to do its best to try and collapse in over there. The Eregian Heavy Cavalry, I think, you know, them and the Dragon Knights have basically cancelled one another out at this point. If we go back over to here to where Rune is having a pretty good time of it, you can see they've managed to surround my Blade Masters. But it is only with Clansmen. So the Blade Masters, despite being utterly surrounded, this is mostly low tier stuff. As soon as the flag room gets to the front, this fight outlook will probably start to look pretty bleak, and you can see defeat is almost a certainty now. And you can see now that the daggers are being thrown by the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen into the backs of my IMLADRIS Guardians, but I have now targeted my entire archer line that still has ammunition onto these Guildsmen, because in melee, the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen are one of the few units that could probably give a lot of my elves a run for their money. Obviously a very skill-focused unit, so I'm going to try and take them out with my archer support instead of trying to just engage them in melee, because numbers are not something I have the luxury of at this point. You can see that this Noritano Cavalry is going to charge into these Veriag Mercenary Riders, and obviously in melee the Runic Horse Archers don't stand a chance really. The Innis Rim has managed to get into melee with my archers, but at this point there are so few of them that my Elder Enway Archers are going to be able to pull them off their horses and kill them. See, there's one Noritano Cavalryman bravely going off in chase of the Dragon's Wrath Warlords, and obviously he's going to find himself very quickly outmatched. You can also see over here that I've decided to pull my Eregian Heavy Cavalry away from the Dragon Knights because killing them was taking far too long. And I'm going to charge into the back of these flag rim, and that was a nice charge there. Obviously I can't outrun the Dragon Knights with my cavalry. Unfortunately one of my Eregian Heavy Cavalry there fall into the flag rim. We'll go back up to 1 speed I think, and then over here you can see the Dragon Knights trying to do the same thing. A bit of a weak charge though, they didn't really manage to get much impact there. And now I'm going to be able to get a rear charge onto the Dragon Knights, which is hopefully going to lead to them dying a little bit more quickly. Defeat is almost a certainty. You can see over here on this flank I've pretty much tied everything up. These Dragon's Wrath Warlords are still here, but they do need to be careful of the Blade Masters. The Blade Masters have a bonus against cavalry of course, and that's going to be in effect as soon as they start getting into sustained melee. You can see this Noritano Cavalry is still, well, it's celebrating, although it needs to be careful with the spikes, and I need to deal with those Veriag Mercenary Riders. You can actually see over here they actually pulled off those Eastron Clansmen to deal with those Noritano Warriors, but the Clansmen, they're a low tier unit. And the Noritano Warriors, they will probably lose this still because the Clansmen, there are considerably more of them, but they're no slouches in melee. Elven Archers, you can't send any old garbage after them and hope they'll win. You can see over here these Eregian Heavy Cavalry are running around. Getting them free of those Dragon Knights was something I probably should have done earlier, to be honest with you. I'm now able to rear charge a lot of these flag rim, get them away from my archers. You can actually see over here the Carmel's Chosen lost to the Eldar Makar because they were completely surrounded by three units of them, and even a very heavy infantry unit like this, it's not going to be able to do the job all on its own. You can actually see there are still Dragon Knights running around, so the heavy cavalry proving itself to be very durable indeed, and the Dragon's Wrath Warlords are there as well. But again, the IMLADRIS Blade Masters in sustained melee are going to be able to do a ton of damage to units like this. So again, they're sort of trapped in melee now. One of the Dragon Knights died to the Eldar Makar. You can see that most of my archers except the Elder Enway archers, because I did actually keep them back a little bit in the fight and sort of try to conserve their ammunition a bit. You can see there are actually some Eastron clansmen are coming over here trying to help the Carmel's Chosen, but it's a bit late for them. In the background you can see my Eregian heavy cavalry starting to tear its way through the Eastron clan hunters. And over here you can see that what's left of my Eldar Quinga, they are shaken, but they are still fighting against these Loke Flagrim. And I've got these Elder Enway archers. I think we're going to be targeting those Veriag mercenary riders. You can see several of them falling. Horse archers, especially sort of lower tier horse archers like the Veriag mercenary riders, are not going to be too durable, especially not to a higher tier archer like the Elder Enway. You can see that my Eregian heavy cavalry is trying to deal with what's left of Rune's lower tier archers, and you can see over here that I've managed to sort of clean up most of his cavalry. I'm going to be able to move my infantry that was victorious over on my left flank over to try and help out my centre. And really the only place that Rune won was over here. They were able to really overwhelm me over here, and I think part of that was down to the fact those Dragon Knights got such a nice charge on one of my infantry units so early, and then they were able to get their Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen into the backs of my IMLADRIS Guardians and really do a lot of damage to them. You can see that the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen were the target of my archers' affections for most of this fight. We've got this Flagrim as well. My Noritano warriors were actually victorious against the clansmen over there, so the clansmen proving themselves, even though they are tougher when they've got their armour upgrade, they are still the lowest tier runic infantry, so appearances can be deceptive in that sense. I've still got 4 units of Eregian, well, 4 men in my Eregian heavy cavalry unit. You can see that this is pretty much the end. You can see those Veriag mercenary riders charging forth, last samurai style, into the Elder Enway archers. And of course it's just a matter of cleaning up now, those Eastron clansmen breaking before my Blade Masters. And yeah, I was very impressed with how IMLADRIS performed, because again, a rush like this,
good tidings. The enemy general lies dead.
There goes the Punic General, can be something that IMLADRIS can be quite weak to.
Awed by the victory we have won here today.
Indeed, and there goes the Flagrim, so the player admitted defeat. So that was a pretty quick, fast and furious game, and I feel as though that was an interesting thing. I think that most people, when they play the elves, at least some people, they make the mistake of going narrow, and against a rush like that, if I'd have been sort of narrow and tried to noob box, that would have gone really badly for me. So going a little bit wider, I think, is the answer as the elves if you're dealing with someone who you think is going to try and rush you. And you have to sort of keep faith that your lower tier units will be able to hold off against lower tier enemy units, because I feel as though in the middle, where the Eastron clansmen just folded before my Eldar Makar, that was probably where Rune ultimately lost the battle, because it meant that I had several units of, you know, Quendi essentially that I could then distribute around the line where I needed it. And while Rune did win on one flank, it wasn't big enough really, and my cavalry was able to have the better of him for most of the fight. The Eregian heavy cavalry managing to beat the Dragon Knights, for example, with the support of my archers was pretty key. If we have a look at the casualties inflicted, obviously the Eregian heavy cavalry getting 247, very hefty amount of kills there. The IMLADRIS Blade Masters, 2 units that did very well, again tearing their way through that runic low tier infantry. And then if we look down here, we can also see the Eldar Makar doing very well against the clansmen as well. The Elder Quinga getting a decent amount of kills again. Archers, for me, I was quite fortunate really that my archers are good in melee as well, because 5 archers is pretty, there's a lot of archers to sort of look after when you're dealing with a rush build, but that worked out pretty well for me this time. But now we'll have a look at another battle, and one that worked out a little differently, and so it's on the same map though, so we'll move on to that one right away. So a somewhat nicer day on the grassy plain this time, but again we'll go through my army composition first of all, and you can see that I've got the Eregian heavy cavalry and some Noritano cavalry here on the flank. Again, the Eregian heavy cavalry was too good to pass up, and I needed some sort of support for them in terms of melee cavalry, and the Noritano cavalry, with how cheap they are relative to the others, is pretty much the only choice there. Then you've got some Eldar Makar, at least with the build I was going. You could go for IMLADRIS Riders as well, but obviously it's going to be a little bit... It's a choice you have to make. If you go really heavy on your cavalry, you need to really micro them effectively, because you don't have very many of them per unit, and if you make a mistake, they're going to die pretty quickly. I got some Eldar Makar again, and I had to bring these guys because I have noticed that Rune's lower tiers will not beat them. Even Flagrim won't trade too efficiently with them. So again, they're going to be a very effective unit, I think, against the human factions, particularly the ones that are sort of more armoured, because the skill of the elves is going to shine through there. So I think against Rune and Gondor, you know, this unit will be quite effective as well, so if you just use them to sort of bulk your line. Once again, I've gone for the Noritano warriors and the Elder Quinga sort of combination. Instead of Elder Enway archers though, this time I've gone for only 4 archer units, and I've gone for a couple of units of IMLADRIS sentinels. Oh, excuse me. And obviously this is two very elite elven pikemen, so my thinking was here that if he tried to rush me again, the middle, I could just sort of tie down with the pikes all day long and he's not going to be able to get through with basically anything, because obviously now with the heavy infantry doesn't have shield wall, you can't just push pikes out of the way and render them sort of completely useless essentially. And then I've got a couple of Eldar backing them up as well, so this is going to be sort of my most effective infantry unit that I brought along. Then if we move up here, I've got some more Eldar, but in addition to the sort of elite elven pikes that differ in my army compositions, I've also got a couple of units of the IMLADRIS Riders. So these guys are the horse archers that the High Elves have. We've already proven the horse archers are significantly better than once they were, so I was quite interested to see how effective the High Elven horse archers would be. But yeah, that's my army composition. So fairly similar to what I had last time, only I'm going to be a little bit more proactive this time. I'm going to try and probe his lines with my cavalry, which turned out to be quite prudent. If we go over here, we can actually see that he's got a unit of Dragon's Wrath Warlords out on the flank. But he's gone considerably more defensive this time. You can see that in a similar vein to what J-Monster did to me against Khan, he's gone for the sort of very defensive setup here. So he's got for his Scion Rim here out on the flank. He's got his Eastron clan hunters here at the front, which, as far as wasting my archers' ammunition, that will be pretty effective. In addition to these clansmen, again, there's not very many targets that my archers can really go after and be super effective in this matchup. But I did want to bring my archers just to sort of make my opponents sweat, as it were. And we've got these Carmels chosen as well. And then out here on this flank, I believe he's got a couple of units of the Variag Mercenary Riders. So, was that 3 units? It might be 3 units of Variag Mercenary Riders, so that, again, that's going to be interesting to see as well. So now we shall begin. So again, this is going to be more... It's going to be, obviously, a longer fight, just because Creed is not rushing me, so it's going to be interesting to see initially how... Obviously the skirmish fight is going to go very heavily in my favour, but I'm not going to be using my archer ammunition on anything too important, as it were. You know, obviously these clan hunters are not exactly the cream of the crop, and we've got these Variag mercenaries again, so he's got a heavy low tier archer presence, but you can see that my arrow fire is just sort of going to tear through into his lines. And if we look over here, you can also see that my IMLADRIS Rider is getting a little bit too close to the runic archers for my liking, but you can see that that's just more range pressure, and these clan hunters are getting ripped asunder. I've got to be careful though. You can see that my IMLADRIS Riders have shifted their focus over to the Dragon's Wrath Warlords again. The Dragon's Wrath Warlords are going to be able to resist horse archers quite a lot. Heavy cataphracts like this are going to be much more resilient to archer fire. My Noratino Cavalry getting a charge, but obviously they're going to lose pretty handily to Dragon's Wrath Warlords in melee. But this does give me a nice screen to get my horse archers in and around, maybe try and get them in the back. Obviously then the shield value will be negated somewhat. Defeat seems almost certain. You can see that this heavy runic horse archer presence is coming over here. You can see that I'm sending over my Eregian heavy cavalry. In a similar vein to the Carmel's Dragon Knights and the Dragon's Wrath Warlords, the Eregian heavy cavalry with its shields and with its armour and with its multiple HP should be able to withstand the horse archer volleys quite efficiently. You can see over here I've got my Noratino cavalry. I'm just trying to chase them off. Don't want them in behind my line right now. Because obviously the High Elves, if you start to really whittle them down, a lot of their units, like the Eldar Makar here at the front, are not very well armoured, so things could go south for me pretty quickly if I allow horse archers to get in behind my lines. You can see that these Noratino cavalry have pretty much wasted them, unfortunately for me, and you can see that the Dragon's Wrath Warlords are able to just mop up my lower tier cavalry in melee. My IMLADRIS Riders still just firing in again. A lot of Rune's units are shielded and quite well armoured, so you know, archer fire against them, they're in a pretty good place to resist archer fire, to be honest with you. But again, as the elves, you do need to bring a ranged presence of some description because it's such a strength for them universally. For IMLADRIS, a little bit less perhaps. You can see these riders. I'm going to just try and kite these Dragon's Wrath Warlords around because they have taken some losses. My Noratino cavalry did inflict some pretty handy wounds on them, and as they continue to get kited by my IMLADRIS Riders, they will take even more. And you can see that I'm just going to sort of retreat now. Probed his lines a little bit. I wasn't able to get in behind his infantry with my horse archers like I really wanted to, but again, that's not really too important at this point. You can see the skirmish fight is still going on. He's got a lot of archers. He's got, I think, 6 units of archers, which is a big investment considering he's also got horse archers. That's not a lot of infantry he's got. I mean, he's got his Carmel's Chosen, sure, and he's probably got some Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen hidden around here as well. They're definitely a good choice against the elves, I feel. And at this point I was like, well, I'm going to retreat my horse archers behind my lines. I'm not going to get anywhere there, and I think I should use my horse archers simply to cancel his out, because in a melee fight I certainly have the beating of Rune at this point. You can see my Quendia sort of just forming up. I'm getting ready to sort of push forwards and move into his lines, because again you can see that he's got a lot of these clansmen here, which we've already seen are no match for the Quindy units. He's got one unit of upgraded clansmen. The Scion Rim as well are an interesting unit. They're obviously a very heavy spearman. And again, that's not really going to stand them in too good a stead against Elven infantry. The skill, I think, is something that Rune are going to struggle to deal with, at least in this setup, because they've got so many archers that they don't really have a lot of infantry to hold themselves together. It's a decent position, but I feel as though, you know, you've got this horse archer contingent over here. There's a lot of ranged units Creed brought. See, moving out over here, I've got my IMLADRIS Riders. I'm going to meet his horse archers in kind. Quality versus quantity indeed. Obviously this one is a significantly sort of who blinks first sort of scenario, and you can actually see here, I think this is the moment where I decide to sort of move forward. You can see my Eldar Makar starting to move up en masse, and I'm also going to send forward my IMLADRIS Sentinels. So the pikemen are obviously going to do a tremendous job against all of this lower tier runic stuff, and they will also do a good job against the Carmel's Chosen, provided they get a sort of favourable engagement. My archers are still going to be firing. As soon as they run out of ammunition, I'll join them into the assault as well. The Variag Mercenary Riders are going to try and sort of get some side shots into my infantry. I think my IMLADRIS Riders are going to respond in kind with some nice arrow fire of my own. And you can see over here, this is where my Eregian heavy cavalry is going to pounce, and I'm just going to go right around his Dragon's Wrath Warlords. The runic cavalry is heavy, but it's also significantly slower than the high elven one. You can see I'm actually just, you know, microing, running my dudes too far away. And actually see over here the Dragon's Wrath Warlords getting into the Noritano cavalry, so I'm just going to try and sort of tie the Dragon's Wrath Warlords up for a while, maybe kill a couple more of them, and now the melee engagement has begun. So obviously numbers is one thing that I really don't have on my side here. The Eastron clansmen are coming in, and they're going to support the Scion Rim. You see the Eldar Makar. So the clansmen here at the front, they need support, and obviously the archers trying to provide that, spraying into my IMLADRIS Sentinels with reckless abandon. You can actually see over here as well, I managed to get a charge off onto the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, which sort of revealed themselves to me. I need to be careful though, because my heavy cavalry could get overwhelmed if I leave them there too long. And you can see now that my pikemen are sort of getting into melee. The front engagement should go very, very favourably for me. The IMLADRIS Riders and the Variag Mercenary Riders, he did have one more unit than me, so they're largely sort of cancelling one another out, which is what I wanted at this point, because I felt like the infantry fight was mine to lose. And you can see with this sort of setup of my sort of lighter infantry at the front and my pikemen backing them up, this is something that I always like to do in 3rd Age ever since I started playing it, was sort of sending in my melee infantry first and then sending in my pikes to back them up. And the IMLADRIS Sentinels are a very effective pike unit indeed. You can see my Eregian heavy cavalry once again sort of drawing a lot of the archer fire. Some of my cavalry units are falling, but all of these lower tier archers are here. Got to be careful of those Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen as well. Over here, where the Scion Rim are, the runic line has held fast. And you can see that these Eastron clansmen are killing my Noritano cavalry. And the Dragon's Wrath Warlords are sort of mopping up my archers, albeit my archers were largely out of ammunition at this point. You can see that I'm now charging into the backs of the main line of Rune, and the Carmel's Chosen falling away. The IMLADRIS Sentinels making my line strong here in the middle. You can see that once again the clansmen just fold in the face of the Eldar Makar, and these IMLADRIS Sentinels, I think I'm going to send them over to try and engage these Scion Rim. Actually no, I'm going to, oh, he charged into his own spikes. That's not good for the Dragon's Wrath Warlords, and they're going to find themselves in melee with IMLADRIS Sentinels as well, so this is going to be the end of Creed's heavy cavalry. And this is going to leave him in a pretty precarious position, because it means that my Eregian heavy cavalry is here. I think during the battle he was a little bit confused as to why they weren't dropping more quickly, but most of these archers, to be brutally honest, are low tier. They're like 5 missile damage and lower. This is one of the finest heavy cavalry units in the game. They're heavily shielded, they're heavily armoured. You know, archers like this are not really going to make a huge mark on them. I feel as though crossbows or javelins would probably be the answer to something like this. At the moment, you can see that now my IMLADRIS Riders are just sort of trying to move to engage the runic horse archers in melee. The noose is tightening, and now you can see these IMLADRIS Sentinels. I'm actually sending them forward. They're actually struggling to beat the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, so the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen definitely a good unit to use against the elves, I would think. You can see I also sent forward some more of my Quindi trying to sort of surround the Scion Rim. The Scion Rim are not going to kill my units very quickly though, but they are holding. So once again, Rune are winning, but only in one part of the battle. I'm now going to charge into these Eastron Clan Hunters and into the backs of the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. Help my pikes. The pointiest hammer and anvil there ever was. Ooh. Coming over here just as the Runic General falls. And the IMLADRIS Sentinels, I was very impressed with how they performed in this battle, considering they took quite a beating from the Runic Archers on the approach. They really held my line together very effectively, because there were several areas, particularly where the Carmel's chosen the Scion Rim were, where I felt like I could lose at any moment. The second unit of Guildsmen that Creed had is over here, and again I'm just trying to hold them back with a single unit of my Eldar Makar. But really at this point, my real ace in the hole is this Eregian Heavy Cavalry, because it's so tough, and it's so quick, and it's going to deal a lot of damage on the charge. And ultimately his lower tier archers are not really going to have enough to really deal with them, but you can see that several of my Quindi have broken. There's Eastron Clansmen going around the flank. These Scion Rim are also coming over here. I'm going to try and shut down his archers now, deny him that ranged pressure that he has, because I don't have any more ranged units. I do have these IMLADRIS Riders, which I'm going to charge into the backs of what's left of this Dragon's Wrath Guildsman to try and finish them off. However, there are Scion Rim here, so things are looking pretty bad in that sense. But I'm sending over all 3 units of my Quindi that are remaining, so this is going to be the primary infantry engagement now. The Scion Rim is really the only thing he has left. Defeat seems almost certain apparently still, despite the fact that I'm 8 percentage points ahead. There's a lot of these Runic Archers, so it might be the Archer pressure that's giving it to him. He's also got a lot of these Clansmen here, which could get a nice rear charge onto my Quindi. You can see over here as well that he does have these Guildsmen, which have tore their way through my Quindi units. Eldar Makar, which are wavering. You know, these Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen don't want any part of a fight with these pikemen from the front now. They're going to try and get the hell out of here. You can see that I've also got these Eldar Quinga, so the Bow Quindi are going to be moving forward to engage in melee as well. So he may have got a rear charge onto me with these Clansmen, but I'm going to get another rear charge in turn with my Bow Quindi. Things are looking a little bit precarious for me, to be honest. You can see that he does still have this arch pressure, but he's got a lot of infantry, and he's managed to buck on my IMLADRIS Sentinels. Apparently victory seems certain there. And you can see that he was just going to try and kite me with his Dragon's Wrath Guildsman, so I'm going to move over my IMLADRIS Sentinels to engage in this primary blob fight. But really this is going to be a nice charge into the side of these very squishy Clansmen. And that is a nasty charge. Tons of them dying in a single blow. I need to stay away from the Scion Rim though. They could potentially ruin my day.
Be swinging in our favor. From such tidings does victory emerge. The battle is very much in our favor. Victory will be ours.
That was a quick turnaround from the announcer. These Eregian Heavy Cavalry just trying to deal with what's left. Well, if you look over here, you can see that they are firing their missiles, throwing their daggers into the backs of my men. I've got this very small unit of Noritino warriors and Quindi coming over here to engage them in melee to deny them that dagger throwing. And I'm also going to send over these pikemen. And obviously when engaged with the pikes, there's going to be no escape for the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. And now my Eregian Heavy Cavalry is largely just going to try and charge into the backs of these Scion Rim. But yeah, they were really my star performers in both battles, to be honest. The Eregian Heavy Cavalry was very, very effective. I was impressed with my word, look at that, he's been absolutely skewered. How is he still standing? But yeah, I was impressed with the IMLADRIS Sentinels as well, but I think honestly the unit I might be most impressed with are the Eldar Makar. They held my line together in both battles very, very effectively. Admittedly, the primary foe they were fighting both times was Clansmen. And even when they're upgraded, the Clansmen are not going to be a match for that highly skilled Elven mainline unit. As for how Rune could beat IMLADRIS, I feel as though defensive is the way to go, because again, rushing forward, it could work if someone's trying to nuke box the elves, because then you can just surround them. And all of the elves are going to be susceptible to being surrounded, I think, except maybe Lothlorien, depending on how they're played. These pikes, that poor guy. But yeah, I mean, going back to what I was saying, I think that maybe trying to deal with the High Elven cavalry,
We have won here today.
keeping them at arm's length because they are fast. So the Runic cavalry, if you get them into a sustained fight, the Dragon Knights and the Eregian heavy cavalry in the last battle largely killed one another. I think without my archer support, it might even have gone to the Dragon Knights. However, I think that the problem is the Runic cavalry is significantly slower. At least the cavalry that can hold its own in melee. Obviously, it's the heavy cataphracts, whereas the High Elven cavalry is very swift. So I think that something like keeping crossbows in the back, in reserve, might be the answer, because then you can get a nice volley off, because you don't need to kill the High Elven cavalry quickly, you just need to keep it away from you, and then you can try and overwhelm their infantry as they come towards you, because if you can waste the Elven ammunition, as Creed was doing in this fight, my archers were pretty ineffectual. I mean, all of the kills that my archers got, like the Quinga, they got a lot of kills, sure, but it was on low tier archers, which were still alive in the late game, so it didn't really matter in the end. Eregian heavy cavalry though, 391, tons of kills there. The IMLADRIS Riders doing okay, Noritan cavalry kind of just being a meat shield, to be honest. And again, the IMLADRIS Sentinels doing okay for themselves, considering they were only engaged late on. Good numbers across the board, but yeah. There was another fight where we played IMLADRIS versus Rune as well, but I won't include that one in this video simply because it is significantly longer. It was a very long 1v1 actually, which should give you an idea of what kind of fight it was. I will show that one if there is interest in it, but this is IMLADRIS, and maybe they're OP as hell, because beating Creed twice in a row, considering he's the champion of the Discord, is odd. I mean, it's great for my self-confidence, I suppose, but yeah, that was the Elves. I hope you enjoyed. Most people tend to like the Elves, and IMLADRIS in particular. They've always had a certain style and appeal. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which I believe will be Mordor and Umbar.